Good afternoon, everyone. And the first item of business this afternoon is portfolio questions. And in order to get as many people in as possible, I'll be grateful for short questions and answers. Question 1, Marco Biaggi.
To ask the Scottish Government how the proposed Community Empowerment Scotland Bill will provide opportunities for community ownership.
Minister Derek Mackay.
The Community Empowerment Scotland Bill will extend the community right to buy to urban areas of Scotland as well as rural areas. This will help the Scottish Government reach the target of 1 million acres of land under community control in Scotland by 2020. The bill will also give communities new rights to help them take on public sector land and buildings.
Thank you. Marco Biaggi.
I thank the Minister for that answer. When the St Stephen's Church in the new town in Edinburgh was recently put up for sale, local residents attempted to purchase it and place it in a charitable trust to retain its use as a community building. That attempt failed and the building has since been sold to a private buyer whose representative I'm meeting later. What scope is there in the bill for consideration of community purchase rights where property is not public but is charitable and nonetheless felt to be an important community asset?
Minister.
Well, I have good news and bad news for Mr Biaggi. The bill will extend community rights to buy across all areas of Scotland, enable communities to buy buildings in the ownership of churches and other private organisations, so it is quite extensive. The bad news is, though, that it's not retrospective.
Many thanks. Neil Findlay.
Given the Minister's obvious enthusiasm for community ownership, will the Minister have a chat with the Cabinet Secretary for Finance and ask him to divert some of the grants for commercial development of wind farms into substantial grants for community ownership of renewables?
Minister.
Well, it would be far better if we had control of such matters in this Parliament, in this place, so that we could make such determinations. But in terms of community ownership and community benefit, yes, the Government supports community benefit and community ownership, and we're delighted that that's expanding in terms of Scotland. But of course, we could make a contribution mandatory if we had such powers in the Scottish Parliament.
Thank you. Question 2, Mike Mackenzie.
To ask the Scottish Government what its position is on Ofgem's announcement that it will delay the implementation of grid charging reform.
Mr Fergus Ewing.
Presiding Officer, Ofgem's recent decision to delay implementation of much-needed reforms to the system of charging for use of the high-voltage transmission system is bad news for the industry in Scotland and bad news for electricity consumers. Scottish generators, Presiding Officer, account for around 12% of generation capacity connected to Britain's high-voltage electricity network, but they pay around 35% of the charges. Ofgem's proposals have the potential to lessen this discrimination by reducing Scotland's share to 25%. This would still be double our share of generation capacity installed across Great Britain, but would be a welcome reduction nonetheless. The changes would deliver significant long-term benefits to consumers, cutting bills by around £8.30 per annum from 2020, according to figures used by Ofgem.
Many thanks. Mike Mackenzie.
I thank the Minister for that answer and wonder if he agrees with me that not only is this placing significant costs on Scotland's renewable energy generators and disproportionate charges, but that is also potentially delaying investment in the commercialisation of new wave and tidal projects, threatening Scotland's 10-year lead in these technologies.
Minister.
Yes, I do agree with that, and it's particularly unfortunate because I think across the political spectrum, Presiding Officer, there is broad support for seeing wave and tidal energy become developed in Scotland and indeed in the southwest of England. But certainly the delay in Project Transmit is extremely expensive. In fact, the estimate is that these delays will cost Scottish electricity generators £90 million. And this does add to the uncertainties referred to, especially if, as has been announced, the implementation of the Minded 2 proposals by Ofgem may not take place until April 2016. This level of uncertainty helps no one, Presiding Officer.
Thank you. Ian Gray.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. Fair play to the Minister. He has been nothing but assiduous in his pursuit of this issue and the effort to reduce grid charges for energy companies generating in Scotland over a number of years. Can we simply ask that he demonstrates the same enthusiasm for getting the companies themselves to reduce their excessive profits and freeze energy bills for consumers, which would save consumers £120 per annum? Perhaps he might start by contacting his colleagues in Westminster and asking them to vote for Labour's price freeze this afternoon.
Minister.
Well, I think the less politics in these matters, frankly, the better, Presiding Officer. And if I could just point out what I thought that Mr Gray had heard earlier on, that the changes which Project Transmit would implement would have benefits to all consumers in Scotland, cutting bills by £8.30 a year. However, of course, the Deputy First Minister has demonstrated the fact that the Scottish Government is extremely concerned about fuel poverty in Scotland, which is at scandalous levels, quite frankly, and that is why the Deputy First Minister, well, I know that they don't like hearing this, but it is nonetheless, Presiding Officer, the truth. And truth is sometimes a painful commodity to listen to, but in this case, the truth is that the Deputy First Minister led the way by calling for certain elements of electricity cost to be removed, namely the ECO, and that, frankly, is the most practical and sensible way of proceeding. So we will continue both to encourage the necessary development of new generation capacity, which is necessary to keep the lights on down south, and prevent there being blackouts, which is becoming an ever more real prospect, by exporting Scottish electricity south of the border and seeking to provide even more measures to help the consumer on top of the enormous sums of money that we quite rightly invest in tackling fuel poverty.
Briefly, Jackie Baillie.
I know the Minister is in self-congratulatory mood, but can he explain to us why fuel poverty is at highest level ever, with 900,000 households affected, and why the Scottish Government's budget on fuel poverty is underspent?
Which has absolutely nothing to do with the original question, but you may answer if you wish to, Minister, but if you choose not to, we'll move on.
Well, I never want to miss an opportunity, Presiding Officer. But, you know, I think Jackie Baillie will, and I think most members will recognise that we have invested very substantially in a very wide range of measures tackled to improve housing in respect of insulation, to tackle energy efficiency measures, and we spend an awful lot more than down south on these matters, and we have done so for some considerable time, especially in parts of Scotland, in the Highlands and Islands, for example, where so many people are off the gas grid and face very real fuel poverty. So, with all respect, we will not be accepting lectures on this topic from the Labour Party. And finally, of course, that fuel poverty is exacerbated by some of the measures which Westminster are intent on delivering, for example, the bedroom tax. If only the Labour Party would agree that we need the powers of independence to end these sorts of measures and thereby further address fuel poverty.
Many thanks. Question 3, Neil Bibby.
To ask the Scottish Government how widely it estimates zero-hours contracts are used.
Mr Angela Constance.
Estimates for the number of people on zero-hours contracts in Scotland are not currently available due to the relatively small size of the sample in the Labour Force Survey. Employment law is currently a reserved matter, with the UK Office of National Statistics responsible for data relating to zero-hours contracts.
Neil Bibby.
Thank the Minister for the answer. My younger brother was employed on a zero-hours contract until very recently. I know from speaking to him the pressures and difficulties such contracts can place on people trying to pay the bills one week to the next. The Minister will be aware that Labour is calling for the use of procurement to crack down on the abuse of zero-hours contracts. Can the Minister tell us how many people are employed on zero-hours contracts who work for companies that get money from the Scottish Government for contracts? And if she can't tell us today, would she commit to collating that information and putting it into SPICE?
Minister.
thank Mr Bibby for his question. I mean, it's certainly clear, as he will know from speaking to his younger brother, and I'm sure he'll also know about some of the recent analysis from the Chartered Institute of Personnel Managers, the CIPD, that there are certainly issues in terms of the people that they surveyed, in terms of shifts being cancelled at no notice, in terms of a high percentage, 20% of people being penalised because they've been unavailable for work, and nearly 40% of people on 0 hours contract wishing to work more. He may be interested to know that while the labour force survey produced by the ONS, while it has limitations, they are doing a follow-up survey of businesses, and that should be published this April. And I think that's quite an important piece of work, following on from the information that's available in the labour force survey, to actually collate information from businesses who will be better able to comment on their contractual arrangements with the employers, or with the employees, because I think one of the concerns is, and again from the CIPD research, is that both employees and employers are not always aware of employment law or indeed employment rights. So in terms of the Scottish Government position, I mean, Mr Bibby will be aware that we deprecate and condemn the inappropriate use of 0 hours contract, and the purpose of the Procurement Reform Bill is very much to look at what we can do as this Parliament, what we can do together, and to use statutory guidance to encourage good employment practice on a range of issues in terms of recruitment, terms of engagement and remuneration. And the Deputy First Minister has given her indication to continue that dialogue with all members in advance of Stage 3 proceedings.
Thank you. Again, I'd remind everyone that short questions and answers would be appreciated. We now move to question 4, which has not been lodged, and a less than satisfactory explanation has been provided by Alex Johnstone, particularly as this is the 5th time this has happened this session. Question 5, Maureen Watt.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government when ministers last met representatives of Aberdeen City Council and what issues were discussed.
Minister Derek McCann.
Ministers and officials frequently have discussions with all Scottish local authorities, including the City of Aberdeen Council, about a wide range of issues of importance to local communities and the people of Scotland.
I thank the Minister for that answer. Given a recent report by Audit Scotland, which found that a fundamental principle of good governance is councillors and officers operating in clearly defined and understood roles, and that understanding is not the case in Aberdeen City Council, what steps can be taken to ensure that the people of Aberdeen are properly governed?
Minister.
Well, I think there's a number of live issues that the Labour leadership of Aberdeen City Council should consider very carefully. But in terms of auditors and governance, there's a number of bodies that could be involved: the external auditors of the Council, the Accounts Commission, the Standards Commission, and the Scottish Public Services Ombudsman. But I think all of us would expect that if we just get back to business as normal in terms of the City Council's Labour leadership, let public servants do their job, and if the Labour Party just get a grip, then these agencies may not need to get involved in what is a ridiculous situation in the City.
Thank you. Lewis MacDonald.
Has the Minister seen the research on central government funding commissioned by the City Council from Aberdeen and Grampian Chamber of Commerce, published in February, which confirmed that Aberdeen is the lowest funded local authority in almost every service area? If so, will he undertake to discuss with the Council the constructive suggestions made in that report for new ways by which central government could choose to support the continued exceptional economic growth of the Aberdeen City region?
Minister.
Well, of course, Scottish Government would be happy to engage in any measure that would leverage in extra finance to Scotland, or indeed the City of Aberdeen. But you see, it's the Labour leadership at Aberdeen City Council who have rejected new finance in terms of that which would flow to the city, threatened to walk away from COSLA, and are not engaging constructively, and also the same administration that voted against the City Garden project, which was bringing in new finance to the city to regenerate the city. So I think we need a far more constructive administration in the city chambers, and of course the Scottish Government will engage, but it is helpful that you don't reject finance that we're trying to send to the city.
Question 6, James Dorn.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what assessment has made of the planned minimum wage rise recently announced by the UK Government.
Minister Angela Constance.
Presiding Officer, the first above-inflation increase in the UK national minimum wage since 2008 is welcome. Scotland's future makes clear that if we are the first government of an independent Scotland, we will set up a Fair Work Commission and guarantee that the minimum wage will rise at least in line with inflation.
Thank you. James Dornan.
I thank the Minister for that answer. We're currently coming to the end of Fair Pay Fortnight, and the TUC have estimated that the average worker is £2,000 a year worse off compared to 2010 as a result of wages not keeping in line with the rising cost of living. Given that this year's rise is the first since 2009, does the Minister agree with me that the only way to ensure that low-paid workers are guaranteed to see the minimum wage rise, at least by inflation, year on year, as outlined in Scotland's future, is to vote yes in September?
Thank you. Minister.
Presiding Officer, the position of this Government is clear that we very much favour annual increases of the national minimum wage, at least in line with inflation. We believe that the UK Government has a poor track record in supporting low-paid workers, and our commitment, as outlined in the White Paper Scotland's Future, we believe is the best way to support almost 70,000 people, two-thirds of whom are women, in Scotland who are currently earning the minimum wage. And over the last 5 years, a rise in line with inflation would have improved the annual earnings of some of the lowest paid Scots by over £600.
Many thanks. Gavin Brown.
Thank you. The Minister said the minimum wage would rise in line with inflation in an independent Scotland. Is her commitment to RPI or CPI?
Sir.
I think I'd like to correct Mr Brown. Our commitment was for the national minimum wage to rise at least in line with the rate of inflation. Our prospectus is set out in Scotland's Future, but I do wonder why Mr Brown doesn't come here and give an explanation as to why over the past decade, that this Westminster Government, aided and abetted with his Westminster Party colleagues, has not enabled the minimum wage to keep pace
Allow the Minister
with the
to be
cost
heard,
of living,
please.
which is an absolute tragedy.
Many thanks. Question 7, Hugh Henry.
To ask the Scottish Government which aspects of national sovereignty the Cabinet Secretary for Finance, Employment and Sustainable Growth would be prepared to cede in order to achieve a currency union with the rest of the UK if Scotland decided to separate from the UK.
Cabinet Secretary John Swinney.
Presiding Officer, the Fiscal Commission Working Group has set out a number of viable currency options for a country of Scotland's size and economic strength, and concluded that retaining sterling as part of a formal monetary union with the rest of the UK would be in the economic interests of both an independent Scotland and the rest of the United Kingdom. As part of their proposals, the Fiscal Commission Working Group recommended a fiscal sustainability agreement to govern levels of debt and borrowing. Within a sterling area monetary union, independent Scotland will have full control of tax policy and other economic policy levers to grow the economy.
Many thanks. Hugh Henry.
I think it's quite clear, Presiding Officer, that the other parties to any such agreement have clearly ruled one out. But in the unlikely event of either separation or indeed a monetary union, I don't think the Cabinet Secretary has been that explicit about what he would rule out. Would he rule out any intervention on taxation, on interest rates, on borrowing, on backing up the banking sector? Exactly what would be ruled out in terms of control of Scotland's economy if in the unlikely event of any monetary union?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I think it's quite interesting that Mr Henry tries to sustain this line of argument, which is that, on the one hand, says that he's part of a joint campaign with the Conservatives to make sure that monetary union doesn't happen, but then sustains his questioning, to which he's quite entitled to do, and I very much welcome, the fact that considering the details and the specifics of the self-same monetary union, which he believes is not going to take place. So I think I will just rest my argument on the contents of the ministerial contribution to The Guardian on Saturday, which was, of course, there would be a currency union. Yeah. And if I use that as the starting point of my answer, I would reiterate what I said to Mr Henry in my original answer, which is that a fiscal sustainability agreement would govern the levels of debt and borrowing that an independent Scotland would be prepared to accept. And I don't think, I think I heard Mr Henry correctly when he said that I hadn't been explicit about that. I was explicit about it a couple of minutes ago. I've been explicit about it 100 times before in the debate. And the reason why I say that is because I accept the necessity for there to be a climate of fiscal responsibility in which an independent Scotland would have to operate. And if only the United Kingdom had exercised a bit more fiscal responsibility in the last 15 years, we wouldn't be in the mess of the public finances that we're currently experiencing.
Many thanks. Bruce Crawford.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. In regard to the money to union, does his Cabinet Secretary recall that the No Campaign's own adviser, Professor Gallagher, told the House of Lords Committee on the 24th of October 2012 that having one currency makes a lot of sense, or that Alistair Darling on Newsnight called a currency union desirable and logical, and that Alistair Carmichael said it would be sensible for politicians not to rule out a currency union? Would the Cabinet Secretary therefore agree that it comes as no real surprise that a UK Government Minister has now admitted that the No Camp are bluffing and that a sterling zone will happen after Scotland votes yes in September?
Mr Swinney.
I think the point that Mr Crawford makes is a very strong point, that there have been various remarks made by UK politicians, not least of which the remarks made in The Guardian on Saturday, which make very clearly the case for the establishment of a currency zone. And just today, in the Financial Times, Professor Anton Muscatelli, who is a much-respected economist within Scotland, has set out the argument that, and I quote, a successful currency union would actually be in the interests of both sides, and especially the rest of the United Kingdom. So I think when we hear contributions, dispassionate contributions to the debate, such as those from Professor Muscatelli, I think it demonstrates that the point that we've been making from the Scottish Government, that the arguments about economic and monetary union relate to the interests of the rest of the United Kingdom just as much as they relate to the interests of Scotland, makes the arguments that Mr Crawford has put forward in Parliament today very strong arguments indeed.
Many thanks. Finally and briefly, Malcolm Chisholm.
Doesn't the Cabinet Secretary accept that his whole policy on a more currency union is governed by a double fantasy? Firstly, by the view that it would be in the interest of the rest of the UK, when many leading economists such as Martin Wolf and many others are saying it would not be in the economic interest of the rest of the United Kingdom. And also, is it not a fantasy that he could achieve such a monetary union without giving such strict control of taxation to the rest of the UK, as indeed Professor Leslie Young, who he was quoting in his defence last week, argued in his well-known paper?
Well, I think the point that I think we've reached in this debate is that there is quite clearly different points of view expressed on the merits or the demerits of this particular proposal. And Malcolm Chisholm can quote economists like Martin Wolf. I can quote Professor Anton Muscatelli. I can quote the members of the Fiscal Commission, all of whom are distinguished economists. And the members of the public in Scotland, armed with this information, have to come to a rational conclusion. And I think, based on the information that has been put into this debate, that the arguments for a currency union would be in the interests of both sides of the border, and that's the point that Professor Muscatelli makes today. The second point that Mr Chisholm makes is debunked by what I said in my answer to Mr Henry. Yes, we accept that there would have to be some fiscal sustainability agreements. That was, when the Governor of the Bank of England came to Scotland to speak a few weeks ago, his comment that there would be some degree of sovereignty ceded to as part of a currency union was viewed as some revelation. It wasn't a revelation at all. It had been ground covered by the Fiscal Commission, which had been accepted by the Scottish Government as part of the rational and considered preparations of our arguments in this respect. And it does not involve control over taxation. What it respects is our ability to exercise different approaches to taxation and economic policy, but we have to accept that we have to live within a sustainable framework of the public finances, which means agreements over debt and borrowing. And I don't think it needs to be any more complicated than that.
Many thanks. Question 8, Colin Beattie.
to ask the Scottish Government what assessment it has made of the impact of the proposed bareboat tax on the oil and gas industry.
Minister Fergus-Ewing.
Strong evidence has been put forward by the industry to show that this new tax measure could prove to be very damaging to exploration and development activity in the North Sea by pushing up costs and reducing the availability of rigs. What the oil and gas industry needs, Presiding Officer, is a fiscal regime which is stable and predictable. That is what the Scottish Government proposes. The industry has not had this from the UK Government.
Many thanks. Colin Beattie.
Does the Minister agree that the Wood report rightly suggests that the UK Government has failed to provide a suitable fiscal and regulatory framework for Scotland's oil and gas sector, and that this has undoubtedly prevented the industry from maximising recovery rates and the economic opportunity from this valuable resource?
Minister.
Yes, it is factually correct to say that that is precisely what Sir Ian Wood's report concluded, that the North Sea Basin has a reputation for fiscal instability, and that is extremely unfortunate. And the current introduction of a new tax, the bareboat charter tax, will be extremely damaging, according to the industry. And indeed, Colin Pearson, the tax partner at Ernst & Young, said, and I quote, "The loss of just one field would certainly outweigh the extra tax raised from this measure." And this is at a time, Presiding Officer, when the industry in Aberdeen and elsewhere is extremely worried about the impact which the rises in production costs may have on further activity. This could not be more serious. The Scottish Government proposes that the bareboat charter tax must be reversed.
Many thanks. Murdo Fraser.
Does the Minister agree that it's somewhat ironic that members of the SNP, who are forever coming to this chamber demanding that the UK Government takes action on tax avoidance by large multinational companies, are now coming to the same chamber to complain when the Chancellor takes exactly this action to close down a tax loophole?
Minister?
Well, no, I don't agree with that at all. The problem for Mr Fraser is that it is the industry in Aberdeen that is expressing concern about the impact of this tax, which they estimate may cost £1 billion to the industry at a time when many projects are seriously under the threat of reconsideration because of rising costs. This could not be more serious. Let me quote Malcolm Webb, Oil and Gas UK Chief Executive. He said, "It is perplexing that the UK Government has chosen to proceed with the bareboat measure. This can only increase costs on the UKCS, where operating costs have increased sharply in recent years. In addition, we fear that this move will drive drilling rigs already in short supply out of the UKCS. Sadly, this is exactly what the oil and gas industry do not need, and that is why increasingly companies are recognising that stability and predictability are not only best for the industry, but are the best means of ensuring the maximisation of recovery and of tax revenues. That is what the industry is saying, Mr Fraser. It is a shame that you are taking the opposite view.
Thank you. Question 9, Mark MacDonald.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government when it last met members of the Aberdeen City Council administration and what issues were discussed.
Sir Derek Mackay.
Ministers and officials continue to have discussions with all Scottish local authorities, including the City of Aberdeen Council, about a wide range of issues of importance to local communities and the people of Scotland.
Mark MacDonald.
I thank the Minister for that reply. Is he aware of the report in this morning's Press and Journal that PricewaterhouseCoopers' Northern Lights report states that the City does not always inspire business confidence and cites the behaviour of the City Council administration as a factor in that? The finance convener of the Council claims that the Scottish Government does not support the City because of the colour of the political administration. Can the Minister advise what the Scottish Government's relationship is with other local authorities which are not SNP-led, and why it is he feels that the Aberdeen City Council administration are an exception to that rule?
Minister.
The Scottish Government has a good relationship with local government through COSLA and individually with all political parties, all political administrations across the country. Never has any other council, as far as I'm aware, proposed a ban on ministers, but on investigation. There is no such ban on ministers in Aberdeen. It was the desire of one convener, the finance convener of the council. A whole number of other matters, I think, have embarrassed the city administration, including bungling the finance requests and turning down resources to the city, which is utterly bizarre. But there is a very serious risk that the reputation of the city will be tarnished if this continues. So we would encourage the Labour leadership at Aberdeen City Council to take stock, to get back to business and to let the good, hard-working public servants of that council get on with business. And I'm sure Aberdeen will be a better place for it. They do run the risk within the political system of being something of a laughingstock, and I think they do have to move on, and I do believe that the parliamentarians and the Labour Party should assist their colleagues in Aberdeen to move on from this appalling situation.
Briefly, please, Mr Baker.
Thank you. One of the issues facing both the private and public sector in Aberdeen is recruiting workers because of the high cost of living. The Minister spent much time attacking the Council in his answer. Will he work constructively with the Council to address the very serious challenges that the Council faces and many public sector and private sector organisations face because of these issues?
The Minister, equally briefly, please.
Well, of course, Scottish Government would engage, but it would work far better if some elements of the Council were not trying to ban ministers from engaging with the City Council. That would be helpful in the constructive dialogue that I'm sure we could undertake to the benefit of all in the City of Aberdeen.
Excellent. Many thanks. Joan McAlpine, question 10.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what discussions it's had with relevant stakeholders regarding access to finance for small and medium-sized businesses.
Minister Fergus Ewing.
Access to finance for SMEs is a regular discussion item in the many ministerial meetings held with the banks, business representative organisations and individual companies. Whilst access to finance continues to be a challenge for some viable businesses with good prospects, we are providing advisory support through Scottish Enterprise, Highlands Islands Enterprise and Business Gateway to help businesses improve their chances of securing funding.
McAlpine.
I thank the Minister for that answer. The Minister will be aware of the Economy, Energy and Tourism Committee report on access to finance, which showed a slightly improving picture, but many firms still facing challenges. Evidence to the inquiry suggested that businesses in my South of Scotland region had the lowest success rate in accessing finance. What can be done to ensure that lenders treat business across Scotland more fairly?
Minister.
Well, I'm aware of the good work that the committee has done, and indeed we are considering that and will respond after the Easter recess to the committee's recommendations and to its work. The survey that the member mentions does relate specifically to companies that are account managed by Scottish Enterprise, which may not be representative of the wider SME business community, but we do share the member's concern that small businesses do need access to finance. There is no automatic right to a loan. A business case has to be demonstrated, but we do think that the banks need to demonstrate more that they are providing lending to SMEs, and we continue to have constructive dialogues with the banks to that objective.
Thank you. Question 11, John Mason.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government what estimate it has made of cost savings of using Revenue Scotland rather than HMRC for collecting and managing landfill tax and land and buildings transaction tax.
Cabinet Secretary Johnson.
Presiding Officer, we estimate basic set-up and collection costs of land and buildings transaction tax and Scottish landfill tax of £16.7 million over the period to 2019-20. This is 25% less than HMRC estimated in June 2012 to set up and collect taxes on a like-for-like basis with stamp duty, land tax and UK landfill tax over the same period. In December 2013, I announced a further investment of £1.5 million in central IT capacity for Revenue Scotland to enhance its ability to tackle tax avoidance, and cost of £2 million for the collection of landfill tax from illegal waste sites, additional compliance activity and the creation of a Scottish Tax Tribunal. These costs are not directly comparable to the original HMRC estimate. Overall, we will invest £20.2 million up to 2019-20 in setting up and running our own taxes, significantly less than the HMRC's estimates of £22.3 million for collection of like-for-like equivalents of the current UK taxes.
Thank you. John Mason, briefly, please.
I wonder if the Cabinet Secretary agrees then that bigger is not always better and that small countries can carry out a range of activities less bureaucratically and at less cost.
Secretary.
I think there is strong merit in the points that Mr Mason makes. The assessment that's been made, for example, on the National Performance Framework that the Scottish Government has brought forward with our public sector and local authority partners, has been viewed generally to be a very strong foundation for assessing the performance and the effectiveness of government within the country. And the Carnegie Institute, who carried out that assessment, essentially said that a world-leading approach had been developed here within Scotland. So I think there's very strong arguments to illustrate that small countries are able to make a decisive contribution to exercising these functions in a most effective way in relation to the interests and the needs of their population.
Many thanks. Can people make certain their phones are on silent, please? Question 12, Malcolm Chisholm.
Scottish Government, what considerations led it to propose a 3p cut in corporation tax below the prevailing rate in the remaining UK in the event of independence?
Secretary.
As part of an economic strategy using the full suite of levers of an independent nation, a responsible corporation tax policy can be an important tool for boosting Scotland's economic performance, creating jobs and helping to offset the gravitational pull of London and the South East. The Scottish Government has published detailed economic analysis of the positive impact of reducing corporation tax in Scotland below the UK rate. The modelling showed that a policy equivalent to reducing the headline rate of 3 percentage points could increase output by 1.4% and employment by around 27,000.
Malcolm Chisholm.
But what is the actual evidence for such a proposition when at least 3 members of his own Fiscal Commission, whom he likes to quote ad nauseam on other matters, have said it would make no significant difference to investment levels, and one of them has said it would greatly increase inequality? Why then does he want to benefit the few at the expense of the many? And in any case, does he seriously believe the rest of the United Kingdom would allow him to reduce corporation tax in this way in the event of the currency union that he dreams of?
Cabinet Secretary John Swinney.
Well, I've gone through the other points about monetary union with the currency union with Mr Chisholm already this afternoon, but I feel the need to restate them, given the fact that he clearly wasn't consuming the points that I made earlier on. And the point I was making was that the government is perfectly prepared to accept the fiscal discipline of a sustainability agreement around levels of debt and around levels of borrowing. And that fiscal discipline then enables the government to exercise freedom over a range of economic policy instruments currently out with our control to ensure that we are able to generate economic benefit. Now, if Mr Chisholm wants to understand what the evidence base is for reducing corporation tax, I suggest that he perhaps has a conversation with Gordon Brown and Alistair Darling, because these two individuals both reduced corporation tax. They must have been. Now, I hear Mr Gray muttering, but they were increasing public spending at the same time. Can I remind Mr Gray that the country went bust under the stewardship of the public finances by the Labour Party? Now, the point I am making to Mr Chisholm is that there is a strong argument for reducing corporation tax to improve the business attractiveness and business competitiveness of Scotland, with the objective of creating jobs. Is the Labour Party now opposed to jobs being created in Scotland? Is that their new careering zeal, is to stop people getting jobs in Scotland? If that's the case, then Labour will be remaining over there for a long time to come.
Thank you very much. Willie Rennie.
Can the Minister tell me what the loss of revenue from corporation tax in each of the first 5 years would be under his policy? I'm sure he's worked this out before he announced the policy, so can he tell me now?
Cabinet Secretary.
The modelling information that we have prepared on all of this has been set out in public. The details are there for members to scrutinise as to what is the effect of reducing corporation tax and the improvement in economic performance, which in my original answer to Mr Chisholm I highlighted as increasing output by 1.4% and boosting employment by 27,000.
Thank you. Question 13, Gavin.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government what progress it has made in taking forward the business rates incentivisation scheme.
Minister Derek Mackay.
COSLA leaders took a decision that they would not discuss the revised 2012-13 business rates incentivisation scheme targets until receipt of the audited 2012-13 non-domestic rate income returns. I can now confirm that all 32 audited returns have been received, and Scottish Government officials will be in discussion with COSLA officials in order to enable agreement to be reached on the final 2012-13 targets.
Gavin Brown.
That question probably could have been answered with a single word listening to that. Can he tell us when will the 12-13 payments be made? When will the 13-14 targets actually be set, given that we're practically at the end of the financial year? And when will the 14-15 targets be set?
Minister, briefly.
I'm happy to return to the member on those questions because we want to work through these figures, engage with COSLA, arrive at the final decision and work through the process, and then I can return with the timescale. The issue here is not a lack of willingness to resolve it. It was to audit the figures to then lead to the assessment of targets, and there will be a follow-through that will incentivise economic development and growth in Scotland, and that resource from non-domestic rates flows straight to local government.
Many thanks. And we now move on to the next item of business, which is a debate on motion number 9.